I once had one other encounter with a spiritual curiosity. I got cancer one time when I was about 40 years old, and I said, God, why me? And I heard an audible voice that said, do you expect to remain a prisoner of anger and bitterness the rest of your life?
Roger, you say that you tell people, um, bring your question to the cave and the cave will answer the question. Do you think that also applies to spiritual questions? That is, the history of caves is that people who wanted to explore spiritual life, psychic life, thought that a cave was a way to do this. So, do you think what you say, that you bring the question to the cave and the cave will answer? Do you think that also applies to spiritual questions?
I think it probably does. Now, I have not always been interested in spiritual questions, but I have more recently been reading the Bible, and what I find is that there's a lot of stuff in there about spiritual questions. There are certain places where Jesus, for example, says, ask if you need anything, just ask for it and you'll get it. If you want the door to be unlocked, knock and the door will be open to you. Well, these are spiritual questions, and I thought, uh, if there is any truth to this, I ought to be able to ask uh, the Spirit, so to speak. So I asked God, can you show me something I have not seen in looking at the Bible? And I got two words. And you may argue about, whether I got audible words or written words or whatever. The words were read Genesis. So I said, well, let's proceed on the basis that this is useful information. So I read the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. I read it very carefully twice, and I began to see that there was information in there that is not evident to most people. Uh, for example, God in the story of Genesis gives Adam and Eve three tasks. He says, I want you to run the garden, I want you to keep track of the plants and animals, and I also want you to name the animals. Now, it occurred to me that how are you going to name animals if you, unless you're curious? And as I read the book, I discovered, uh, to my satisfaction, that God gave mankind curiosity as a gift. And I thought, why doesn't the Bible contain the word curiosity? And I looked and it doesn't. It's not in Hebrew, it's not in Greek, it's just not there. And I began to see, well, maybe God didn't want somebody to know about curiosity. That doesn't sound very spiritual to me, but at any rate, I also saw that uh, inherent in the story of Genesis is free will as a gift. Uh, Eve, for example, was told, don't you can eat from any tree in the Garden of Eden, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because surely you will die. Well, there is a first class free will opportunity. You can not eat this, or if you eat it, you will die. That's an ultimatum, really. And so that was another gift that was given to mankind at the time. Were there other gifts? And I discovered that there were opportunities given to gifts. So I formed the opinion, which is what it is, that God gave everybody, not just favored people, or not just first people, but everybody, three gifts at birth. And those three gifts are curiosity, free will, and opportunities. And why wouldn't he see that those got written down in the Bible? Well, the only reason I can see is that he didn't want Satan to know, because Satan got his information from hearing God speak. And if he didn't speak those words, it would delay Satan, presumably, from his effort to spoil God's plan and wreck mankind. Now, that's a very private view of three gifts, one of which is curiosity. And I've decided that there is evidence that curiosity is in everybody. Everybody has seen a baby who, if you present your hand to the baby will explore your hand. If you put your face close to the baby will explore your face with his fingers. In other words, every baby I've ever seen is curious. That tells me that everybody starts off with curiosity. Now, what do parents do to encourage the curiosity or to try to stamp it out? Why people would want to stamp out curiosity, I don't know, except maybe they feel that their own authority is under question. But nevertheless, some parents go to great lengths to encourage the curiosity of their kids. They read to them, they take them on trips, they put them in new situations, they hand them to other people who want to hold them, and so on, all of which I think stimulates curiosity that they already have. And some kids, of course, have very rich curiosity and are able to use it. Now, that's my take on spirituality. Yes, I think you can find that out. I once had one other encounter with a spiritual curiosity. I got cancer one time when I was about 40 years old, and I said, God, why me? And I heard an audible voice that said, do you expect to remain a prisoner of anger and bitterness the rest of your life? Now, my question was not answered, but on the other hand, I thought, I'm busted. I was an angry person. I pretended to be jolly and jocular and enjoying people, which I sort of did. But on the other hand, I was kind of bitter about some things in my life. And so I resolved to not to be an angry, bitter person the rest of my life. So my life changed as I began to do other things.
Thank you, Roger. I really enjoyed listening to what you just said. And when I listen to what you just said, I think back to that that position where you said, if you have a question, take the question to the cave, and the cave will give you an answer. And then when I listen to you, I think that the Bible was another dark cave for you to explore, and God gave you curiosity so that you could explore the Bible, so that you wouldn't be trapped in the dogma of other people's. But the Bible was you again exploring a dark space and coming up with answers because you were given curiosity, because you were given free will. So it sounds to me like you used the Bible how the Bible was intended. And let's not forget the book of Job, who is that odd questioner there in the Old Testament, who is challenges the darkness with his questions. So when I listen to you, it sounds to me like you use the Bible how the Bible was intended. The key that you were given to the Bible was not dogma, but was the gift of curiosity, the gift of free will, and you were successful in exploring the Bible as a dark cave.
I think you're absolutely right, and that provides a new revelation on something I've been doing for the past couple of years. Now, Job is particularly one of four people that I picked out of the Bible to look at these three gifts, as I call them, curiosity, free will, and opportunities. Job uh, starts off as a very, very wealthy man, and God is having a meeting, and Satan is attending the meeting, and God says to Satan, "Have you considered Job? He's the best, most faithful man that ever occurred." And Job says, and Satan says, "Well, that's only because you give him all kinds of stuff. You've made him rich. Now you take all that stuff away, he's going to curse you to your face." And God says, "Well, we'll see, but don't hurt him." Well, then all kinds of things happen to Job. And a little while later, Satan comes together and he says, "Well," he says, "You told me not to hurt him, but what happens if I hurt him? Then he'll curse you to your face." And he says, "Well, don't kill him." So then uh, the grief that comes to Job is almost unimaginable. And yet, Job doesn't give up, although he says he's really nothing. He doesn't understand. He wants to understand why God is doing this. Uh, his friends try to comfort him, but they keep saying, the only reason you're suffering all this is because you've sinned. And he said, "I haven't sinned. I know what I'm doing here." And finally, he gets in a questioning with God himself, and God says, "Can you make wild animals such as whales in the sea?" And he says, "No, I can't." He said, "Well, you don't understand everything, do you?" He said, "No, I'm just stuck here." Well, Job represents somebody who doesn't fall for sin as the only cause of bad luck. Uh, he is finally, when he said, "You are God and I am not," he says, God restores his previous wealth and all the things that he had. So he's a person who illustrates curiosity to the nth degree. He also illustrates free will. He realizes that if he has done something wrong, he's probably going to face the consequences, but he can't think of anything he's done wrong. He has opportunities in that these friends come around and try to comfort him, even though he's in a pretty sad state. Uh, on the other hand, God says to these guys, you guys are trying to comfort him, but you're doing a terrible job. And Job says, well, they're not doing such a bad job after all. You shouldn't condemn them. And Job essentially prayed for his friends. This shows a very rich uh, story about curiosity, about free will, and about opportunities.
Yes, Roger. And, that's an excellent reading of the book of Job in the Bible. And, you're framing the book of Job in terms of curiosity. It's interesting that in culture, a lot of fables warn people and try to deter people from having curiosity. That is the Greek myth of Pandora's box. Don't be curious and inquire what's inside the box. Bluebeard's castle. Don't open that door. Those are all fables to deter curiosity and deter people from asking questions. But as you've explained, the book of Job in the Bible is exceptional because it doesn't warn people against being curious. It doesn't warn people against questioning the deity. And the people, the other people around Job, they speak in terms of dogma. Job doesn't. He explores that dark cave with his own mind, and he's able to establish a relationship with the deity where the others following the dogma, where the others who aren't asking questions, where the others who aren't being curious, they're not able to establish a relationship from the deity. You've just explained that you yourself became Job when you had cancer at 40 years old. You started to question the deity,
Right.
and of course, Jesus on the cross has the same questions of, why have you forsaken me? Why is this happening? So that's a wonderful explanation you've given of the book of Job, that it's in the Bible, and you connect it with having been given the gift of curiosity, having been given the gift of free will, having been given the gift of opportunity, and that's in the book of Job, and that's what I understand that you've explained very clearly, and you've explained that it happened in your life as well. You've explained about going into dark places and asking questions, and you've explained the answers that you got. So at age 96, what's the biggest question in life that you haven't answered yet?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm wondering whether wisdom continues unabated after Solomon, after you, after me, after anybody. This has to do with a form of immorality and immorality of a form of life after death in information. We know that books by Mark Twain, for example, are on the library shelf. Some people have read them, many people have not. Now, the people who are not familiar with Mark Twain have no idea what he's talking about. Other people, a few other people have some idea that he was one of the most prolific writers that ever lived. And furthermore, his curiosity shows up in practically everything he wrote. So, my question is whether wisdom in books is going to prevail, or whether it's all going to be burned up one of these days in some kind of atomic or nuclear explosion. You know, people keep saying, well, there's an asteroid headed for the Earth that's going to hit here in 2032 or some number like this. And of course, that never happens, but it could. So my big question is wisdom going to continue? The Bible has continued for a long, long time. It's been translated very carefully in recent years, pretty insightfully, I think. And I think maybe a few things will survive, but how much will survive?